Throughout the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and first half of the 1960s, DC Comics was the highest-selling comic book distributor in North America, with the combined might of Superman and Batman in their pocket, who were usually dominating the sales figures. It seemed like nothing could stop them, but then something happened. Atlas Comics, who had formerly been known as Timely Comics in the 1940s, that were most known for their Western, romance, giant monster, medieval, Bible, and war-related stories, would rebrand themselves Marvel Comics in 1961, originally shown as a small box with an MC on it, and would reach into this yet untapped realm of superheroes. They had made the Human Torch, Namor the Submariner, and Captain America in the decades prior, but they usually stuck with what they knew best, the genres I just listed. However, a writer and editor for Marvel Comics named Stan Lee saw the success of characters like The Flash, Green Lantern, and the freshly debuted Justice League of America from DC, and wanted to capitalize on the popularity of superheroes. He went against many conventions found within the genre at the time, making the comics and their storylines target a wider audience, both young and old, and their heroes facing real-life problems people faced every day. In that sense, they felt more fleshed out and relatable. Today, let's look at the top 5 best comic characters to come out of the 1960s decade. I hate to break it to you, but DC won't be on this list. The 1960s were dominated by Marvel Comics in terms of creative flow. They made timeless character after timeless character, and around 1966, they would take the throne from DC, becoming the new sheriff in town. Their sales would usually surpass DC's throughout this time, and they haven't looked back since. Number 5. The Incredible Hulk. I'll discuss more of this character in a future superhero breakdown, but the Hulk is without a doubt one of the most recognizable Marvel heroes ever created. He debuted in May of 1962 and was inspired by Mary Shelley's Frankenstein monster. The Fantastic Four's Thing had become increasingly popular among fans, and writer Stan Lee wanted to create another character that would be viewed as imperfect by the outside world, a misunderstood monster you could get behind. Originally, the Hulk was colored gray because Lee didn't want any particular ethnic group believing Marvel was targeting them in any way with their stories. The gray color was also a problem for the printing press, as its shade would fluctuate from image to image. So, shortly afterwards, in issue 2, the Hulk's color was changed from gray to green, further reinforcing his Frankenstein roots. Before I move on to number 4, let's not forget some of his iconic villains that debuted in the 1960s as well, like the Leader and Abomination. They both deserve mentioning. Number 4. Daredevil. One of my favorite Marvel characters debuted in April of 1964, that character being the man without fear himself, Daredevil. Though his first several appearances depicted him in a yellow costume akin to those worn by acrobats, his iconic red design would be featured a year later, in issue 7, where he fought Namor the Submariner. Batman has always been my favorite superhero, and I think I enjoy Daredevil because his character is very similar in tone to the Dark Knight. Much like Bruce Wayne, he lost his parents at a young age, in this case his father, and his stories discuss themes related to loss, tragedy, psychological trauma, vigilantism, etc. I'm not religious, but I also find the way it analyzes the fine line between what's righteous and what's evil to be very unique as well. What's good and bad isn't always black and white, and I think Daredevil fully embraces that. It's very thought-provoking, which is what I like in my comics. Number 3. The Fantastic Four. Marvel's first family, debuting in November of 1961, the Fantastic Four predate all of Marvel's iconic superheroes, and started a trend which would become a staple of the brand moving forward. Now, Marvel had created Namor the Submariner, Captain America, and the first Human Torch in the decades prior, but the Fantastic Four were the first to use the true Marvel superhero formula we know of today. All those characters I previously mentioned were fairly insignificant for all intents and purposes, and all products of their time in some way. Each one was either replaced, rebranded, or retconned to fit the new Marvel mold of the 1960s. It has been widely known that Stan Lee was going to leave the comic book business if it weren't for the success of the Fantastic Four. The unique and dynamic relationship of the team made them stand out from every other superhero in the medium at that time. They were a family, husband, wife, brother, friend. It made them more relatable to readers. The Fantastic Four really shaped what would become not only Marvel Comics, but the entire genre as a whole. It changed how these stories were told. It made them more believable and realistic, despite the exaggerated powers and abilities of its characters. Without the Fantastic Four, superheroes would be a lot different. Comic books would be a lot different. Once again, I should list some of their villains that debuted in the 1960s, such as Doctor Doom, Galactus, and the ever-underrated Annihilus. They have a special place in every comic book fan's heart. At least, I hope. Number 2. The Uncanny X-Men. I really wanted to put the Fantastic Four as number 2 because of how significant they were to the comic book and superhero genre, but one thing that puts the X-Men over them is the fact that they were more influential in terms of cultural significance, not just with the medium itself, but the message they promoted. Ever since their debut in September of 1963, the Uncanny X-Men have been a metaphor for prejudice of all kinds. Racism, religion, diversity, sexuality, genocide, all these serious topics have been discussed in X-Men comics over the years, to varying degrees, with more and more of them being introduced and analyzed as society itself changes. The X-Men and their stories are some of the best across the medium, and have helped introduce these concepts and ideologies to young and old alike, with all of us hopefully growing in knowledge and acceptance in the process. Another villain roll call: Magneto, Blob, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, Juggernaut, and the Sentinels. They all debuted in the 1960s, and all served a strong purpose within X-Men stories, many of which bringing along their own host of interesting topics to discuss. Okay, here are a lot of honorable mentions in no particular order because the 1960s were literally on fire in terms of superheroes and comic books. We have Hank Pym, the Ant-Man, the God of Thunder, Thor, his trickster brother Loki, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Black Panther, Ultron, and from DC we have Batgirl, Reverse Flash, Ocean Master, Black Manta, and the always amazing and highly underrated Conqueror of Worlds, Starro. All these characters have been great additions to the superhero genre, and have all been influential over the years in their own way. And the number one best comic character to come out of the 1960s decade is The Amazing Spider-Man. I don't think I have to explain myself with this one. Peter Parker, Spider-Man, is one of the greatest superheroes ever conceived, and is arguably one of, if not the, most popular and recognizable superheroes on the face of the earth. He has been for several decades, and will remain for many, many years to come. I really don't want to go into his origin story here, because we all know it by now, and I want to save a more in-depth discussion for a superhero breakdown video in the future. But know that he is one of the most relatable heroes out there, because he deals with issues a lot of people his age do: rent, relationships, keeping a job, balancing his school life with that of a superhero, if the story still depicts him in school, that is. Despite having all these amazing powers, he's just like you or me, and can't seem to catch a break. Life isn't perfect, and neither should one of a superhero. Much like the Fantastic Four, I believe Spider-Man helped shape what these stories would become in the future, across the entire medium. And once again, let's mention a few of his villains that debuted in the 1960s. The majority of his major ones did, like the Chameleon, the Lizard, Dr. Octopus, Sandman, Vulture, Scorpion, Green Goblin, Kraven the Hunter, Mysterio, Rhino, the Shocker, Kingpin, Electro. I mean, goddamn. This has been NerdGasm. If I missed any characters created in the 1960s that you feel should have been on this list, make sure to leave them in the comments section down below. Like I said, there were a lot during this time. I tried my best to find ways to mention as many as I possibly could. As always, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to the channel to be notified of all future content. I will see you in the next one. Take care.